we have to say hello to our next guest. It's an old friend of the festival because when he came here back in 2016 to introduce us with his first game, which was Oxenfree. Good afternoon, Sean Krankel. How are you doing?
Very good. How you doing?
Fine, well, as fine as you can be considering what's going on. If I
Yeah, I'm
might,
just hiding out in a little cave right now.
if I might, yes, let me put my colleagues in trouble. Si alguien de la mesa pudiera traer, esto está muy feo, lo siento, perdón. Si alguien pudiera traerme los tarjetones que me he dejado en la mesa, se lo agradecería muchísimo. Sorry about that. I forgot my, big cards with the script. For the rest of the afternoon, because I have to be now
Let's
for
wing it.
1 hour, for 1 hour and a half doing interviews. But let's wing it, definitely. It's been 4 years. I was sure about my first question. What's going on, man? How has been this 4 year for you? How has time treated you?
Absolutely insane. I don't know. Honestly, it feels as though that time period from shipping Oxenfree until now has just been one long project, even though we've shipped quite a few games in between. We have grown the studio a bit, certainly not to the size of Riot, but we're 20 people now instead of 4. And so, yeah, it's been a great journey. I think that we ended up, even since I last saw you, we have put Oxenfree on basically every platform under the sun. We've shipped a few more games that we're very proud of. We did a game last year called After Party that is about 2 friends who die and go to hell and have to drink their way out of hell. So it's this kind of wild comedy. We did an adventure game for Apple Arcade this year called Next Stop Nowhere. So we've been just making nonstop ever since 2016.
So it's been a very, 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 very long hangover that drove you to a party in hell.
Yes. Yeah, most definitely.
We're going to talk about After Party and your next projects in a minute, but first we have to tackle the virus elephant in the room. How have you adapted to the pandemic? There's 20 of you now. It's not that difficult compared with the AAA companies in the industry, but I guess that there was some challenges along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's obviously the same downside that everybody's felt. It's been scary. It's been tough mentally, emotionally. It definitely hits us in waves in terms of the impact on the team morale. But in general, knock on wood, everybody's been very safe. The fact that we had already been over the course of the last couple of years working with other folks that weren't on site, I think sort of helped us prepare for remote working situation. And the upside is that we've actually sort of expanded our talent pool and we're now working with more devs from around the world than I think we naturally would have before. We just hired a first full-time senior developer in South Africa. And so this is the kind of thing that I think we would not have otherwise done. But it's still a challenge, right? Like we absolutely miss being in the office, all the things as a small studio that are just organic about bumping into somebody and looking over somebody's shoulder and talking during the day. We're trying to recreate via things like Discord. And it still feels a little bit stilted, but ultimately, work's getting done and morale is as good as can be because fortunately, again, like our lives haven't been majorly hit by the virus.
On the other hand, you don't have to wear pants.
You don't know what I'm doing right now, do you?
Anyway,
I won't stand up. I'll spare you.
But maybe we would like your Batman pajamas.
I do actually have a SpongeBob onesie that I wore for Halloween. Anyways, moving on.
I love SpongeBob too. But yeah, moving on. Let's talk about After Party. You said it's a game about 2 friends drinking their way out from hell. But at the same time, Oxenfree was a supernatural thriller, but it was a coming-to-age story. What's After Party really about, deep down?
That's a great question because I think on the surface, a lot of people just had viewed After Party as a ridiculous kind of comedy that was larger than life. But ultimately, it is sort of a spiritual successor to what Oxenfree was in that it is a coming of age story, but now for folks who are in their early to mid 20s. Whereas Oxenfree was this teenager tale that was supposed to be very relatable, set against a bunch of supernatural situations. In this one, Milo and Lola, who are the 2 lead characters that you play as, are just coming out of college. They are a little bit aimless. Milo has a need or want to sort of reset his life with regards to his social life and friend base. Lola is somebody who couldn't wait to get out of college to move past all the surface BS. And the two of them have been best friends since they were quite young. So this is really about sort of friendship and what it means to be moving into proper adulthood, and what does a friendship that's been, almost 20 years long really look like under that strain, and why are you still friends? And we really throw all of the challenges that you could imagine at those two as a friend in this crazy backdrop of being in hell and trying to get out of hell. But ultimately it gave us this opportunity to make a bunch of fictional characters in hell that represent the challenges of that friendship. So you get a personal demon, and that personal demon is constantly throwing your choices at you and making you feel bad about what you've done. And so it's really about friendship and being in your early 20s. It just so happens to be in the afterlife.
In hell. I just received a message through the internal line. My colleagues are telling me that you have to release the Spanish localization. I don't want to be a
my
pest.
thing, when you were going to say, what's the question for the end? The Spanish localization is coming early 2021. So,
woo, come on.
Yes.
Got a headline here.
We're doing it right now.
Back to After Party. There's this saying, you can tell what your story is. You can tell your story, but you cannot really tell what it is about. I've read a very interesting review about After Party that says that it's about, or that it talks about the relationship of our culture with alcohol, very complex relationship that we have with alcohol as a drug. Does it strike as strange to you how many different interpretations your work can have?
Not necessarily strange. It's actually more, it's reassuring, because all of those layers of nuance are being discussed internally, but none of what we ever try to do is be overly messagey with it. So we want to, approach these tough themes, certainly, but not do it in a way that feels judgmental. And so, it was definitely, in a game about, alcohol being a almost RPG style boost to your personality through the game, we think it would be irresponsible to not acknowledge the other side of that. And so, without spoiling aspects of the ending, it really does build up into something that shows that complex relationship that you're talking about, and how some folks hide behind that or dive too deeply into it. So it's got the party aspect, it's got other more nuanced aspects of it, but in terms of like surprise behind other interpretations, I don't think we've had any surprising interpretations yet for any of our games. It's just been more of like oh, I'm glad somebody caught on to that.
Someone realized.
Yeah.
I remember we discussed 4 years ago when you visited Bilbao how, in my opinion, dialogues in games, well, I love them as a mechanic, but at the same time, it's intrinsically non-interactive mechanic. It's a moment in the game where you click a button and drop the gamepad because characters have to say something. And I found Oxenfree to be very innovative in that sense, because conversations were much more dynamic. You could interrupt other characters and they could interrupt you, and they felt more natural, and through that, they also felt more interactive. You have expanded that a little bit in After Party. I think that's like a seal of your studio. How are you approaching that moving on from now?
Yeah, I think, in the case of After Party, our approach was to almost treat drinks as a way to onboard new choices for the player, and really allow them to reflect their personality. And so the drinks themselves are much more kind of ridiculous in their theming, and they're kind of fun. They're not actual cocktails. It's more like, I want to talk like a pirate, or I want to be to lose my conscience. So I'm going to take this shot, and that will vomit out, and I will now have a very different personality, which will change our dialogue. And frankly, I think that's about, with that specific system that we've built, that's as far as we want to maybe tweak the way to just onboard new dialogue choices. What we're doing with our future games, which I can't go too into, but one, it is finding other ways to influence narrative that isn't just verbal. I think that's a big key for us, is that we want to branch and have agency over the story, but not just through your words. And two, find other tools that we've already used in our games before and just do it sort of better. So in short, I would say, I think After Party was the most juicing of this idea of like, how many branches can you have? Because, whereas in Oxenfree, You had 3 dialogue choices in After Party. Because of the various drinks, you could have 6 different drinks in a bar, which meant that the dialogue trees spiraled much, much larger. For our future games, we're not going to do more. We're going to find new ways to branch story that are more sort of physical or about where you are at a certain time, but still letting the player influence where that agency or where the narrative goes.
What's the future of narrative-driven games? Because they keep killing them every year, but they keep coming back from death. So I guess that we will have narrative games for a long time, hopefully. But now with streaming games and games by demand and subscription models, that's kind of a tricky economic model for a narrative-driven game.
Yeah, I mean, for our studio, we have sort of, and will continue to for the foreseeable future, stuck to what might be a little bit of a naive business model, which is just make a single serving experience game that we believe is really well crafted and something that the player isn't paying to buy choices in a free to play game or something like that. Nothing against that, but for us, I think it's just not our expertise. And so the future of narrative driven games, it's funny. I think our studio has become fairly well known for branching in narrative, but I don't believe that that is necessary at all. I just think that we need to let players interact with a story in a new way. And so for me, I'm probably one of the biggest fans of The Last of Us on the planet, and the branching is just not there. And that's fine, because there's a very intentional director and writerly sort of hand behind that, and the experience is guaranteed. The player is sort of funneled through a very particular experience. For the few games that we've done, we built in from the ground up the point that the agency had to pay off in said story. So as a coming of age story, we found it important that the player gets to craft how they come of age. And that's for both After Party and Oxenfree. But for our future games, that might not be the case necessarily. Like, we still want agency, as I mentioned, but there's also some concepts that we have on the table that have less agency, but that are more about novel ways to interact with a more linear story.
Mm-hmm. You have mentioned one of your next projects that apparently you can talk about a little bit, or am I being nosy here?
I think you're being nosy. I can talk around stuff, but yeah, we're not announcing anything yet.
Okay. I thought I had heard a title or something. It's just my imagination.
Oh no, no titles yet.
You come from Disney, which is quite a big company. Then you started your own small company. Now you are established as an indie studio. You are growing more and more. Does it feel like history maybe doesn't repeat, but it rhymes a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think we are continually, Night School's been around for 6 years now, so we've been really trying to keep the same fire and creative combustion in all of our bellies that we did when the studio was only 4 people. And it's important to us, even if we're trying to get our IP out there in new ways, because one thing we can talk about is that Oxenfree is being worked on as a TV show. Hopefully there's some things to announce about that next year. After Party, we're also exploring as something that would be more of a linear format. So there's some exciting things. Granted, that stuff, until it's done, I don't believe any of it's really done. So who knows? We might be in 5 years saying, yeah, an Oxenfree show is coming. For us, it's mostly just like, how do we keep reinventing ourselves and trying new things? And that's another reason why it's important for us to not just rest on the systems that we've built in the past, because we don't want to do the same game over and over again. So yeah, I think it's an exciting time for our studio because we are trying new things, but it's also a scary time because of the way that the industry has morphed. And like you said, a lot of narrative studios either go out of business or the model is adapting so rapidly. So we just got to kind of keep changing as we go.
When I'm not working in this, I usually work in PR for indie games, and releases are very scary. You don't sleep the night before because you're nervous. And you, instead of trying to release all the versions the same day, you've kept releasing for every platform under the sun with months of difference. Do you get used to that, or it's always as scary as the first time?
Oh, it's everything is scary. Like right after we get off of this, I'm going to be back to being scared. It's like, like literally everything is scary.
The natural state of any
With
developer is fear, right?
yeah, if there's not a base layer of anxiety, you're doing it wrong. I think that the staggered release thing for us was a happy accident. With the case of Oxenfree, when we did that, it was because we also had a short-term partnership with some folks, and so we had then launched the PS4 version a little bit later, and then we had launched mobile after that. And what we found was that was actually really beneficial. One, in creating nice little bumps in interest over the course of the year, because a lot of games at this point need a long time to grow, right? I mean, we've seen Hades turn into game of the year over 2 years or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So it's the kind of thing that we want to have reasons to continue to grow. But two, it's helpful for us just because trying to ship on everything at once with a small team is just extremely difficult. Like QAing that and getting it out everywhere all at the same time, and having multiple languages is just something that we're, in our current size, not necessarily capable of. So I think it's ultimately the right thing for us, because we know when and where and how to launch over a longer period of time. But it's definitely scary because you're never going to have as much PR as that first launch. So you have to find reasons to retain people's interest over time, and hopefully it's just because you made a great game.
All games ultimately, but mostly indie games because they're more personal, tell something about their creators. What does your game say about you?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think it's funny, we almost start backwards in our studio, which is a little bit odd, especially for a narrative studio, where you would assume we'd probably start with the theme and grow from this theme. But we actually usually try to start from just what sounds cool and then embed it with themes that feel personal and find that story over time. And I think our writing team really does a great job of mining what on the surface is a cool sounding idea for something that at the center can have a real heart to it. So we almost very much flip that. And I think what we've tried to do with all of our games so far is ensure that those themes, even though the situations that people are in are larger than life, the themes are as relatable as possible. And we want the player to feel sort of like the average version of themselves. So it's somebody who feels pretty good about thinking they're somewhat intelligent and wants to be pretty smart, pretty snarky, but has some real issues they need to unpack and are multi-layered and complex. And so for us, it's important that the player doesn't go, oh my God, I'm this crazy, over the top space marine right out of the gate that feels like a badass. It's more like I'm me being thrown in the deep end, because ultimately that's kind of how all of life feels. So I think, yeah, our games have used the backdrops of the play space that you're in as a reflection of the stuff that's a lot smaller that kind of concerns us every day.
We've talked a lot about the narrative side of your games. That's my favorite part. Not of them, of games in general, but Night School Studios is also easily recognized for its care on the visual side of things, on the music. Soundtrack of your games is usually delicious. The visuals of Oxenfree and After Party are, the kind of thing that you only need one glance to recognize. How do you approach that? Because I'm guessing that you have to keep some cooperation and tension between the different teams, so they can get the best from each other.
Yeah, there's a lot of tension in the early days to find that look, because I think and this is something where it helps that our team is really split between a lot of veterans who have been either at AAA studios or on the TV or film side, and then also a lot of brand new folks. And I think the idea of having a real signature fingerprint for each one of these games is very important to us, because of what you said. We just need somebody to be able to glance at it and go, yes, I know that game. Now, that's a very difficult thing to pull off with a small team, right? Like, we're not making a giant, 3D animated feature where we can pull off any look that we want. Because if we did, we'd make Spider-Verse caliber of production values and visuals every time out of the gate, but we can't do that. And so there is a lengthy period of visual development up front, specifically for that reason. I think the other thing that we want to do is pick locations and concepts that are familiar, but put our own stamp on them, which makes things even a little bit harder. So like in the case of After Party, that was a game where you're in hell. So you're assuming, yeah, there'll be pitchforks and orange fiery backgrounds and people going, crying on rocks or whatever. And we said, how do we subvert that? How do we make it feel more like a place that you'd party and bring in neon lights and other cultures and make it feel like Shibuya over here and, Amsterdam over there, and mix it with all these other themes. So it's just a lengthy early on process. And then, and it feels awkward and uncomfortable for a while. And then, man, when you finally hit that one like visual, everybody can look at it and go, that's this world. And then you just kind of move from there. But we definitely put a premium on that. And then music wise, that every single game we've done has been scored by the same person. His name is Scientific, and he's just a badass. He's extremely versatile. He's done a lot of stuff throughout the industry, but it's very helpful that, he can take the themes and the feel of what our visuals and story are and really translate it orally, which is exciting.
That's great. You've got you are all the games industry is living in a tipping point where between one generation and the other, but while for AAA studios, I guess this is a very exciting moment because they thrive in this new technology. For indie games, is a bit like, okay, I hope this passes soon and people can start paying attention to us again. How are you living this moment?
So because we are in the early stages of some new stuff, we are fortunately kind of ignoring that bit of what's happening because we started these other games about 6 months ago, and so I think our focus has been just on making these new games. Now, I will say that the new technology is exciting for us, and so we have to go, how can we use some of that? Now, there are things that are at the highest production value level, like all the ray tracing and everything else that we want to see on screen that people consider to be the plussed up version of visuals. But I also think there's stuff kind of at the OS level, like, PS5 has a lot of the dynamic hint features, things like that, that any developer can and should take care, use to basically augment their experience. So we're not really I'm not necessarily worried about the new platforms. I'm actually, frankly, I don't want to ever ship during like Christmas season again because that's just when all the AAA stuff is out.
Yes.
So, like in the case of Oxenfree, we shipped early in 2016 and there wasn't a lot of stuff around. After Party came out sandwiched between like 5 AAA games and it was just like, this is terrifying. Yes. So it's more about dodging AAA and frankly, we're just, excited about the new platforms.
Mm-hmm. And we were talking about how you were a very small company 4 years ago. Where do you envision yourselves in 4 years from now? Or where will you like to be?
I think we would like to be, as a studio, a company that has 1 to 2 games in development at any time, that the size doesn't grow much larger than 20 something people. And that's particularly because the further you grow, the harder it is to maintain that personal touch that you were talking about, or at least I don't know how as a studio head to maintain it, frankly. Like, I think that the smaller the group, the better results that we get. And so that one of the exciting things is that we've started to partner with some other studios and we'll do like co-development stuff at times. And that's very helpful because you get a lot of fresh folks coming in or new expertise, but without growing the studio to 40, 50, 100 and beyond people. But ultimately, at the end of the day, in terms of like what we make, I just want to keep making games that by the end of it, somebody has had an emotionally resonant experience. And I don't mean that in a cheesy, like, I want to cry at the end way. I just mean like, I want people to either wholeheartedly laugh or be actually terrified or maybe they should cry. Something that is memorable and exciting. And I think that story is at the center of that. But, as a studio, we're trying to cram more interesting mechanics in on top of that right now. And that's, for me, what's really exciting is the merging of new types of mechanics outside of just dialogue into story games.
The next one is a tough one. I don't want to spoil myself because that's something we recorded for another day. I asked another guest about politics in their games. Not if their games are overtly political in the sense that they try to convey a message in particular, but if you think that well, everything is political. So if you aren't trying to sort of make people think or question the statu quo, then you are maybe just saying that things are okay with you. Do you agree with that? Do you
Right.
think that everything is political, that even your games in some way have a political seed within?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be naive of us to think that we're not approaching things and at least having a voice about certain aspects of politics. I think that the evolution over the last 4-ish years of how messy politics have gotten and how binary it's become and how divisive it's become is unfortunate and weird and scary, and that is forcing things to become even more political by their very nature. I think, I don't see us making a game that is overtly, intentionally, like on the nose political. We're not going to make a military sim or something like that anytime soon. But yeah, I absolutely think from everything from world politics to identity politics, like this stuff just has to exist in a narrative, certainly if the narrative is being authentic. So for us, I think it is just about being authentic. If things feel false, like if our lead characters or if the themes that we're trying to push feel false, then that's a bigger issue for me. But we're not afraid of delving into political territory. I think that, After Party had a nice sheen over it that afforded us to be pretty brash in a lot of what we did. We tried to approach it the way that The Simpsons kind of handles things like that, or Rick and Morty, where it's like there's a layer of snark around some of these things, but we can hit a political theme right on the nose. But in the future, will our stuff be political? Yeah, inherently. I think we're all people and we have a POV.
Yeah, and if you did a coming of age for teenagers, coming of age game for 20 somethings, then probably you're doing a coming of age game about retirees at some point.
Exactly. Oh my God.
That would be very
I'll let you
fun.
know next year where that is. That would be hilarious.
People in the asylum, what should I do with this knee? Or
Exactly.
anyway, thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure as always talking with you. And what I really hope is that next year or the year after that we can meet personally here, hopefully, or in any other fair. We've been discussing a lot. Which changes are here to stay, and I just hope that we don't lose the personal side of things in this industry. People don't really understand, I think, that even if this industry is super big in some sense, it's larger than life, there's not so many of us, and we all know each other, and we really enjoy these rare moments of meeting in events.
That's it. I absolutely agree. I mean, I think that the time that we were out there a few years ago was extraordinary. And like you said, like it's important to have these connections, even if we can be making games and getting them out the door remotely. Being in person is just vital. So yeah, if knock on wood, everything's looking better next year, and I'll have a heck of a lot of stuff to announce next year.
Thank you, Sean. I won't detain you any longer, and see you soon, hopefully. Best of luck.
All right. Thank you.